Welcome back to Emotional Runway, the entrepreneur's guide to mental health. In today's episode, Krista and I talk to physician Dr. Lida Fatemi, an academic hospitalist, although she shares some news about that in this episode. Dr. Fatemi is also the founder of The Conscious Physician, a wellness-based business for physician moms. She'll talk about her own struggles with mental health and burnout, and how she's now helping others. We had a few audio issues this week, so my apologies for that, but you'll definitely want to hear what she has to say. I hope you enjoy.
The mental health realm is where I'm at right now. I've transitioned out of my institutionalized practice of medicine, which I was an academic hospitalist. My job really ends end of December 31st is my last day at University of New Mexico. But so I was, I did this very official thing for a decade of being a certified academic hospitalist, a mom, just all the things as a female that you deal with, and also being in a very regulated, space. Institutionalized medicine is very regulated. Yes. And, education was awesome. I loved that. I loved teaching residents and medical students. I did that for 10 years, and that's like fascinating. And in the past few years, I've transitioned into becoming a physician coach after I went through a deep burnout and deep depression. And then I was like, you know what? This sucks. Like, who wants to live this life, And, super disconnected with my daughter and with my family. And I was like, okay, I need to do something about it, because I had such dark moments that I had definitely thought about suicide. I never planned it, but as soon as the thoughts even came, I was like, whoa, like, what are we doing?
So thoughts of suicide, but what are the other signs, or how did you become aware you were like headed towards burnout?
Disconnection, feeling disconnected. And I didn't want to engage. In residency, I was this super, super engaged advocate for residents. I was a huge part of the resident union that we have here at BONM that started in New York, actually, many years ago. We changed, call rooms, created a physician lounge. I was instrumental in doing all of that. And then I became an attendant, I became a chief resident. During my chief year, I started feeling kind of disconnected, and, my community it felt like it was falling apart. Mm-hmm. Whereas in residence, I had this super strong community of women, actually. It was 6 of us who just hung out all the time, and I was the only one that had a child. I had my first child in medical school. It wasn't easy, but it was what kept me even more disciplined. She made me so much more disciplined than I was previously. I'm very thankful for her. And then in residency, I was super involved, had a great community, very connected, was doing a ton of awesome things. And then you become an attending, and it's like silence. You're alone.
You're out on your own in the world now.
Yeah.
And supposed to know all the things. You're looked at as the one that holds all the information and should be able to kind of balance yourself and kind of make it look easy.
Right. But no one gives you any of the tools, right? You're in medicine, That's how it is. It's about apprenticeship, but then you look at your own attendings and you're like, wow, they have terrible lives themselves, where they're not balanced at all because no one taught them ever before, how to do this. So, for me, it was like breaking that cycle. I think a part of what I just do in my own life is breaking my own cycles, breaking my own conditioning and patterns that I've carried with me from any part of my life, from culturally how I was brought up. I'm from Iran, grew up in a theocratic dictatorship, very oppressive towards women, very hospitable. We're very lovely people. Like when it comes to taking care of other people, we completely sacrifice ourselves. Yes. And that translated beautifully into medicine. We are able to follow rules very nicely because we understand that if we don't, like if you grew up in a dictatorship, then if you don't follow rules, then you disappear. You know what I mean?
No, I don't think we know what you mean.
It's true. It's true.
What the path to becoming a physician, was that something expected from your family, or I mean, being in Iran, and like how did you get there?
Yeah, great question. You know, my grandfather was a physician, internal medicine doctor, just like I am, in Iran for 40 years, and he was the head of the health department in Tehran for many years. He died when I was 12, but he was definitely an inspiration to me and to the rest of my family. He was just an amazing human who really cared about his patients. The community loved him. And so, you know, I was 14 when we came to the US. I didn't know any English. I came to Georgia and stayed in Atlanta for the next 17 years. You know, I went to a high school that was an all-American high school, didn't know any English. That was really hard, but I also didn't have a community, which was even more difficult. Yeah. It was really during that time that I had to really get deep into, hey, what do I want? And my family didn't really have a significant role in me choosing the medical path. In fact, I remember my dad saying, you know, you're this little tiny thing, you know, medicine, you're going to have to be staying up all night. And that gave me more fuel.
I'll show you.
Well, and if so I think in interest of full disclosure, Lida and I went to college together. And so I've known her for, too many years. 20-something years. But you never half-assed anything, right? I mean, so you were always, like, you always had 1,000% energy. You were always, like, overdid everything in a great way. That's why everybody loves you. But do you think that, like, I mean, do you think that some of that led to the burnout? You overdoing it?
100%. 100%. Thank you for the compliments, Matt.
I knew her when we were EMTs together 22 years ago.
Oh, that was some of the best days. That was so fun.
Those were the days.
Yeah, those were the days. We did, you know, and I think we all gave it all of ourselves to what we did. And you do the same thing today too. Yes, I think that is a recipe for disaster, as I've, you know, recognized myself. And, you know, through my burnout, which lasted a couple of years, and coming out of it has taken so many more years. And it is my greatest gift at the same time. Mm-hmm. Because now I am in this space that I can, you know, I've processed it so much that now I've created a pathway for others to either prevent their burnout or get through their burnout and where it's coming from. And, you know, yes, I think giving myself, you know, all of myself to what I do in everything that I do is an absolute, you know, that's the statement of the day. But learning how to create a container of self-compassion is what I learned took me through burnout, and is now I'm here and I'm able to even give more than I've ever been able to in the past, because I take those moments in the day. I don't wait for the 3-week vacation at the end of the year. In fact, we may never even take that vacation. My vacation is every day dispersed throughout the day. So I sprinkle all these different, what I've created conscious life practices throughout the day, which are the container of that self-love and rejuvenation so that I can keep going. The amount of things I do now, and I'm like really doing them in a very conscious and very intentional way, probably a lot more than I've ever done. And the impact that I'm making in the world around me, in the community, of female physicians and entrepreneurs. So I work with a lot of female entrepreneurs as well, and mompreneurs.
It's catching on.
Yes, it's catching on. I liked it. So you know what? We're gonna do it. Yeah, so that's a gift to be able to really educate people that we don't have to suffer. And when we we all want to serve, right? Like that's our greatest want in this world. Most physicians, most of us, most entrepreneurs, we're all trying to solve a problem, right? But number one, if you're not serving you on the daily, then you cannot serve anybody else. And I'm saying that from a place of lived experience, because when I was burnt out severely for 2 years, the bottom of the darkness of life, I was not a fun person to be around. I couldn't think clearly. I was fatigued all the time. I didn't want to connect with anyone, including my own child, my husband, my parents. On the outside, we have a beautiful home. I have a great job. I have this great family. But inside, I felt like I'm rotting away. I don't even know who I am anymore. I'm like, I don't even know where I am, in a different orbit, And so, yeah, paving my way back into, hey, let's get to know who I am again.
How did you do that? Like, what was it? Just self-directed? Did you just start kind of looking into your, like, researching on your own? Did you contact someone to talk to? Like, what did that process look like?
Yeah, I've actually thought about that. Like, what was what point was it? I think one thing that was very scary was, one was the thought of suicide. The other was, if I'm not here, who's going to take care of my child? And I'm not here. My body is present, but I am not connecting. I'm not present with my child.
Yeah.
Yes, dissociated. Absolutely. So that was like a tipping point. And then I was like, oh my God, I got to do something about this. Like that little tiny voice saying, this is not the way to live. And do you really want to be in this state for the rest of your life, in this miserable suffering for the rest of your life? So what I did is I turned into my spirituality. Mm-hmm. I've been on a path of spirituality since I was 12, which my parents introduced me to. My parents are godsend. They're incredible, incredible beings who, even living in that theocratic regime, they still exposed us to different religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, all spiritual paths outside of what was shoved down. Yeah. In underground meetings, where we had guards standing at the doors and we had to go like literally underground, and being so crazy.
Yeah.
But exposure was huge at an early age. My dad also made it a point that we travel every year to a different country. He's a businessman himself and he has a PhD in chemistry. So in Iran, he was the first one to kind of marry veterinary medicine and, create pharmaceuticals for cattle. And that's, his products are still going or being produced in Iran. And but he found that, traveling is a really beautiful way to expand yourself and expand us as kids. So he took us every year to a different country. We went to Cyprus, we went to Germany, we went to Italy. And, after the Iranian Revolution in 1979, a lot of our family members, they left Iran, which is a whole traumatic thing of its own, but they just dispersed all over the world and we got to visit them, during the summer break. So I think for me, it really was reconnecting with my divine within, and with my spirituality. And within my spirituality, meditation and contemplation were huge, and I had forgotten about it. I had put it away for many years, and part of it was like really like maybe pleasing others, like people I was in a relationship with, like my first husband, or my current husband I didn't know, but in Iran we were silenced and censored to the point of, oh, if you speak about your spirituality to your cousin or to your best friend, the next day your dad may not exist. So that was a survival strategy that I learned, and many of us have learned, coming from that society, to keep quiet. But in keeping quiet and keeping silent, then you're going to lose your connection with yourself also. And that's what happened to me, but yeah, that's the reconnection with that sacred part of you is really what started the path into me finding myself again.
Yeah.
I want to ask a quick question on that too. You're talking about spirituality and not religion.
Yes.
And I want to point that out too, because I know that that's not something that everybody is into. But spirituality and religion don't have to be linked, right?
No. I think what I love about being spiritual is that you're able to see the divine within yourself, or that sacredness, or whatever you want to call it, that essence, that light within yourself. And you can see that within everyone else too, regardless of what religion they practice. And you can see that divine in the other religious practices too, because every religion I've read all the books, and I've, studied as much as I could. And I've even attended, community meetings and things like that in Christianity, in Islam, in Buddhism, Hinduism, all of it, to Judaism, to understand the essence. And at the end of the day, we all want to have meaning to our life, and spirituality gives us that meaning, that connection with maybe a, power that we cannot see, but we do see. I mean, we're moving myself. That's like, holy, like what's happening here? It's quite incredible to have this body and be living on this earth. And spirituality for me, it brings that awe and wonder back into life. And you can see the divine in everything. It doesn't have to be a particular person, religion, guru. No, it's within you.
Well, yeah, and I asked that question because actually, so my wife Amanda as well too. This is something we've been struggling with a little bit because I grew up Jewish, she grew up Christian. Neither one of us was particularly religious growing up. We're definitely not now. So we're new-ish to this town, and we're sort of struggling to find that connection to a group, right? And so we talked about like, I don't, neither of us really wants to go to church or synagogue. Like that doesn't feel right. But there's something else there, which is, we both believe, agnostic of our religion, that there's, a higher power and there's bigger meaning to things, and we want to do good in the world. But trying to find that outside of the vessel of religion, I think, has been a struggle for us. So that it was intriguing to me when you said that.
I think we look for connection in religion and community in religion. And, because religion like Judaism and Christianity and Islam, they've been around for so long and they've been paid attention to for so long, it comes with the package of community. Yeah, right? And so for me, it's, and you can try this, Matt, you and Amanda, create your own community. That's one thing we did when we moved into this neighborhood 4 years ago in Albuquerque, where we didn't really know a lot of people outside the hospital. The hospital just becomes your life as a hospitalist and as a physician in general. You come home, you have no energy to like create anything else outside of it. But we particularly took initiative in getting to know our neighbors.
Yeah. No, that's been a big part of it for us as well too, is the networking. And actually we're going to start a church because I don't have enough things going on. So we're going to start our own church. It's a good tax write-off, I understand. No, I'm kidding.
Do it. Hey, you're doing it with this podcast. You're doing it with the work you're doing, I think organized religion, again, I think the most positive thing I see in it is community and the community work that you do. But why can't we create that ourselves? And why can't we truly look at ourselves and your inner work? And you are a religion in your own, period. You have a religion within you. And to really tap into that authenticity and take all of the rest of it off and see what you really are. And that essence is a religion. And to create that in your community, you're creating a church yourself, and bringing mental health. I think that by itself, like, is a religion. Let's pay attention to our mental health. Let's find who we are without all these external factors that have shaped us for so long, or we've allowed them to shape us and push us in certain directions. Like, recognizing what is mine and what isn't is huge in this path. And community. I think if community was our religion, hey, I'll join you, Matt.
Well, it sounds great. I'd love to have you. I think that's what really got us started down this path too, is because, I think a lot of what we talk about on the show is there's this stigma around mental health. And I think as entrepreneurs, as all three of us are, we have this fear that people will hear, oh, they're having trouble, that person is struggling, they can't do this. And that's not at all the case. And in fact, I always like to reiterate the fact that saying that this is hard doesn't mean I can't do it. It just is acknowledging and giving, some breath to the idea that this is hard. And we obviously are not alone, because as we've started to talk to entrepreneurs that are struggling, they're all struggling, right? This is not something that's unique to one person or the other. And so it's about separating your worth as an entrepreneur and your worth as a person from the struggle that you have running the business, because it is hard. I mean, there is no getting around that. This is not easy. And I think that's the most critical piece about what we're trying to accomplish on the podcast and with the Mind Spark, stuff that you guys are doing here in Huntsville, is to get entrepreneurs to recognize, okay, this is hard. It's okay to say that it's hard. It's okay to get help and still be good at your job and still go raise money and still, accomplish what you're trying to accomplish with your business.
And I think one of the most important things, that you point out, Lida, is this is a shift in a culture, right? So we are traditionally our approach is a Western approach to mental health, which sometimes ends up in what medication is available, and so incorporating Eastern practices. And that's what it sounds like, your travels and how you were raised gave you that lens and appreciation for, practices of really spirituality. How do you take care of the whole person, mind, body, spirit?
Well, and I grew up in a family of doctors, and so they all think all of this stuff is bullshit. When you're like meditation, they're like, and until these studies started coming out that say, oh yeah, meditation actually does make a difference, right? There's a physiological component to this, and there is
it's science.
Absolutely, but but it was bunk science until fairly recently, in the eyes of a lot of physicians, and so having that, and this is why you talk about diversity of thought and diversity of experiences. You, having grown up outside this country in a completely different type of society, have a different lens, as you said, on what's, how to approach this versus those of us who grew up in Western society and grew up in a place where, you don't talk about mental health problems. That's the crazy guy in the institution. And I think that's super important to destigmatize it.
Well, and no matter how you grew up, like when you start to struggle, we generally come back to the same things. As you mentioned, community is about finding your people. Where do you find that support? Who has your back, and then the practice of, which is, the mindfulness practice, spirituality, taking care of what you're allowing to go in your ears, what you're consuming in your eyes and your mouth. Those are all really critical parts of being well. And I don't care what walk of life you're from, you generally go to those things to be well.
100%. I can't agree more. And in fact, what's fascinating is, so the work that I'm doing, number one, lived experience. Number two, when I'm coaching other physician moms or mom entrepreneurs, mompreneurs, as we as we talk about mental health and what that really means, and we couple it with self-care and self-compassion, what we see is a huge shift in this life that is now you're thriving in. It is not that you're struggling anymore as an entrepreneur. You're not struggling anymore as a physician mom. You're actually thriving. You're actually thriving. And we know this, like from meditation, you have different brain waves that you guys may already know. But so we go through this education in my program where, so in the awake state, when, I'm performing, or maybe I'm running a code, or a lot of us are just like crazy on our cell phones, like going back and forth, we're in high beta, where there's no creativity. There's, we see spikes neurohormonally in the cortisol system and the HPA axis, the adrenals go up, like they're just producing a bunch of crazy hormones, that keep you going. But when we are in that state all day long, there's no room for creativity. There's no room to breathe. There's no room for rejuvenation. When we meditate, we go into alpha, theta, and even delta, which is like this sleep brainwave where creativity occurs. And as entrepreneurs, we know very well how important it is to be creative, because that's where innovation is, and that's where we can move our companies forward. And even in negotiations, if you're sitting across the table from somebody that you're trying to ask for money, how do I approach this person? Where's my intuition? There's very little intuition in the beta waveforms. And, your brain is like, oh my God, I'm running away from a lion. That's what you're thinking. There's no room for thinking about, oh, what does my intuition say? My intuition is saying to run. And there's no room for growth. But the more we are in this mindful state, we are tapping more into that alpha state, which is like when we're about to drift off into sleep. And we see these like more sinusoidal calm waves. And in that state, there's a lot more opening of like clarity of what the next step needs to be. That's just one example of what meditation is. There's a bunch of other scientific articles. I'm actually writing a book on this too, on these conscious life practices. Just like you said, what am I putting in my mouth? Be conscious of what you're putting into your mouth. Like, what are you eating? A lot of carbs? We know that carbs have been shown to light up the dopamine pathways, which are the addictive pathways in the brain. And you're just running after it like an addiction, eating carbs. Where was I going with this? And then the insulin spike. So you're eating the carbs, the glucose, then the insulin spike, then the glucose crashes, then you need more carbs. But it's not sustaining you, and it doesn't have much of a nutritional value to your body. In fact, you're going to feel kind of gross after like a carb binge, or if I eat, carbs throughout the day, I just don't feel good. And to check in with yourself, check in with your body. If this particular vegetable doesn't speak to you, okay, don't eat it. Just because somebody said it's good for you doesn't mean you should be eating it. Check in with yourself. You are an intelligent being on a cellular level. Check in and feel it out. And that intuition will tell you what to do. Hydration is one thing that we all suck at. We wake up super dehydrated, and a lot of us have acute kidney injury because of it. Which, it's just because of dehydration. Drink throughout the day, and don't drink Coca-Cola and sodas and sugary drinks, because we know what that does to our health. So I love that you bring all of that up, Krista. It's beautiful to be mindful of what we're doing with this being. What environments are we putting ourselves into? What relationships are we engaging in? And are they sucking our energy? Are they toxic to us? But all of this comes forth when you tap into who you really are on this path of self-discovery. If you're not tapped into yourself, then how do I even know? Then I'm going to be everywhere with everyone, completely unconscious. And I've been there. That's why I can speak to it.
Well, and in the counseling space, what often comes up when people come in is most of my clients come in, they don't even really, they're not aware that they have a choice to change this, which always is so fascinating to me. And it's like two big things. Yes, you are capable of change. If this is not working for you, there's a way to do this differently. You can create a different lifestyle, and also giving people permission to be like, it's okay to do this differently.
Well, and I think, it was something that I've noticed, and when I was going through it, is, you start to feel very trapped by this experience, being an entrepreneur for a long time. I have investors, I have loans, I have, all of these things. And so, when we've talked about this before, people are like, if you're stressed, just get another job, like it doesn't work like that. I can't walk away from it. But, how to change other things about your life, because you're probably not sleeping well, you're probably not eating well, you're probably not exercising enough, you're not taking the time to be spiritually connected, or even taking a vacation, whether it's a day or two, or as Lida said, throughout the day, little periods of time where you feel like you're on vacation. I'm just guessing here, this is maybe a leap too far, but tell me, you talked about coming out of residency and being totally lost. You probably, like many other students, like, oh, as soon as I finish this, everything's going to be easier. And then you get out there in the real world and you're like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't easier. This is harder.
So it was so soberingly scary, and it was like, oh my God, I'm on my own. And now you're not being evaluated anymore. Like all the, for so many years in medical school and then residency, you're being constantly evaluated with check boxes. You're jumping through hoops. You got to go for the next thing, And everybody's like, no, you got to go for the next thing. And then all of a sudden you're out, and no one prepares you for that. I remember talking to our chair of palliative medicine. She's lovely, lovely human. And she was like, yeah, I felt this way, like very unsteady for the first 3 years of being an attending. And it's okay. And that made me feel so much more at ease in that moment. I still felt lost because I didn't feel like I could connect with the other attendings. Because a lot of them weren't new, and a lot of people are just not open to talking, or they've forgotten how it was when they got out. Or I never forget that, I never forgot my residence. I remember everything. So, and talking to cohorts, just like with entrepreneurs, as you mentioned, Matt, like it's hard, and it is important to know that it is okay, that it is hard. There's some days that you're like, what am I doing? The doubt that comes can take over. But having particular tools in your toolbox throughout the day to go to, for example, like when I feel overwhelmed and I'm trying to, push my entrepreneur thing, or I'm learning this push and pull with it, is just go outside and sit under a tree. Just connect with the tree. I mean, it sounds so hippie, and it is so connecting to yourself, because we are nature. Or I'll sit in the sun and I just allow the sun just blaze into my eyes. I close my eyes, and it's just that moment of like, and physiologically we know what's happening. There's a change. There's like, I was in this high beta, holy shit, what's happening with my life moment, to this moment of, okay, I'm moving into my alpha brain waves, and my cortisol isn't spiking like crazy anymore, and I'm calm, and my breathing is more calm, and okay, life isn't so bad actually,
I'm still here, I'm still breathing. Yeah, well, and I think that's, so all of this sounds great in a vacuum. You add on top of that a global pandemic, and having kids and all that other stuff, and all of a sudden it starts to feel overwhelming. One of the things that I found interesting just watching your journey over the last 2 years really is how much you've been talking about the pandemic and what that is doing to affect all of us. You and I had this conversation off air a while ago about how you were starting to see more patients come in with substance abuse problems, with kidney and liver failure, and what have you seen, from the mindfulness perspective, but also from the physician in a hospital during COVID perspective? What has this done to us? Because I don't think any of us have really we're not far enough away from it yet to actually sit back and go like, wow, that really sucked.
It's huge, so let me start from the hospitalized patient. It was very interesting to see that the hospitalized patients, it was as if they have the plague. The plague is like 40% mortality, COVID is 1%. And what we found out after like about 6 months of being into it is that the mortality is predictable, more predictable than what we thought. So I did agree with the first 6 months of being more strict about things, businesses shutting down. And I never agreed with that. I thought that was like, that's how you really go downhill with society, because now you have financial difficulty for a major part of society, if not all of society. When we shut down schools, oh my God, my husband and I are both physicians, but we're both hospitalists. And we were part of the minority even thinking this way, that mental health is going downhill so fast. And it was really hard to keep quiet, but we were also censored. So that was a little weird. But we had like maybe another 2 physician friends who were like, no, we foresee this really big thing coming our way, that a lot of our politicians or, people at the forefront who are making policy are really not seeing. Because, I feel like when we get power in our heads, then we're just like, oh, this is the way it is. And for us to sit back and say, okay, 6 months later, like we can change our world. Like no one's going to fault you for that. Science changes and we find more information. And as we find out more information, we should change our ways, and that's okay. But we really stuck to the gun, of like COVID being this crazy thing like the plague. And so we had that. There was a lot of stigmatization and fear around it, and continues to be somewhat. The isolation was monumentally difficult for patients in the hospital who had to be isolated for 5 to 10 days at a time. And we still do that, which is mind-blowing to me, for asymptomatic COVID with psychiatric disorders, but that's a whole different thing. So isolation where, people were feeling like, oh, you already have insecurities about yourself, and now you have COVID and you're hospitalized. Oh my God, right? Like I'm on this, I'm not even a human. What am I? So that really messed with people's psyche. People dying alone was really hard in the hospital.
Disconnected from family, right? Like people couldn't visit, so you lost that connection to friends and family.
Yes, that was one of the hardest things to deal with as a physician, as a nurse at bedside, as family member, for the patient themselves. It was really, really difficult. And then, having that isolation of, children in like school children who were no longer able to have a connection with their network, their safety network. What's so crazy is that it was right after 2020, I want to say maybe February of 2020 or no, 2021, I want to say. It was right after the isolation period for kids, being at home. I was talking to my friend, Dr. Leslie Strickler, who is the state's child abuse specialist. And her and I were just, I was like, Leslie, I'm seeing so much more substance use disorder, like at a severe level that I've never seen before. Number of suicide attempts that are coming in, number of overdoses. What's happening, What's happening with your pediatric population? So she goes into, she kind of gently went into, we saw a lot more child torture cases. And I was just like, whoa, I'd never heard that term in medical school, never heard it in residency. And then here it was. And she's telling me, when we calculated, it was about 12 times more than before the pandemic. And that was the day that, like, I mean, my heart just broke. And what does that even mean? Because child abuse, yes, like I was, we're all aware of that and horrendous, right? But that's a different level, right? You're intentionally hurting a child over and over again for a prolonged period of time to cause death or disability, mentally, physically. And that just changed my world. And that's really when I submitted myself to the world of mental health, knowing that it was the caregivers that were inflicting these, crimes really against the children, but then understanding, like, where are these caregivers coming from and what mental space they're in, right? And so you cut off your network of humanity and community around you, cut off completely. You can't visit anyone. You can't say hi to anyone. And as human beings, and I delved into the research significantly because I wanted to understand what's happening, is we are herd animals, period. We are hardwired to connect. Physically, hug, touch, speak, see each other, be in each other's presence and energetic fields. We're just meant to be. You take one individual out of their tribe, let's say you're in nature, we're talking about ancestors, you take that person out and they get lost in the woods, that equals death, right? And in that state, you have tapped into your sympathetic nervous system. We see the amygdala and the limbic system light up like a beautiful, like my onesie. And it's really difficult to get out of that because this means survival. If I'm not into that state of run for your life and save yourself, then I cannot survive. So we're hardwired for that. And then now we put an entire globe of humanity, right? The entire humanity went into isolation, where there's disconnection from each other. And everyone went into this limbic system overactivation. And some of us had an easier time getting out of it, and some of us are still there. And that's what I'm seeing.
God, that's so, I don't think we fully have a handle on what all this meant for us as a society. I don't think we will for years. Yeah. I'm fascinated to read the books in 10 years about how this truly affected society forever. So I kind of as 9/11 was happening in slow motion and all the stuff that affected, I think, we have some perspective on that now. So, so one of the things I like to sort of end with, although we could talk forever, but we should have you back another time. Part two. What are some of the concrete steps that you take that others can take to, if you're in that funk, if you're having a difficult time, what do you suggest people do? Where do they start?
Number one, I would say create a relationship with yourself, create a ritual in the morning when you wake up, because when we wake up in the first, 10 minutes of awakening, we're still in that alpha state of, brain waves. You can ride that, and how awesome. It's a gift given to you. So creating a morning routine, a morning ritual that centers around self-compassion is number one. For me, that means I sit on the ground and I meditate. And you've seen this on my WebMD, content on TikTok, Matt, I'm sure, through Amanda. I literally get out of bed. I don't touch my phone. Don't touch your phone. That's like the worst thing you can do, because that's like that activates the amygdala, and that's no bueno. So I sit on the ground.
Matt's guilty. I can see it on his face.
100% guilty.
That's the first thing you can do then. That's don't touch your phone in the morning. Sit on the ground and ground yourself with the earth. Like literally imagine your tiny little body compared to all of earth and see how the earth is supporting us up. I think that just by itself puts us in different mode throughout the day. So I do that. I do my hydration, and as I'm drinking my hydrating drink in the morning, which is water, a pinch of pink Himalayan sea salt because it's got all the minerals and electrolytes that I need for the whole day, and a couple of drops of fresh squeezed lemon. And that, the amount you hydrate yourself is about 80% of absorption versus 20% of plain water absorption. So I do that. And as I'm doing that, I also visualize my body just, whatever aches and pains I have, like, go away with light that is going through my body. And then I do something that embodies me, which means some kind of an exercise, or if it's stretching, if it's deep stretching, hold that stretch for 30 seconds, for 60 seconds, and get into it. That's like your psyche and your body talking to each other, and you're telling yourself, Matt, I care about you. Krista, I care about you. And I'm going to take this moment to get in touch with you and check in. And that's just what that is. And some mornings I get a full workout in, but most mornings I'll just do 5 minutes of interval training, and that's plenty. That's amazing. You'll feel so good for the rest of the day. So, I'll give you these 3 tips this time, and next time I'll give you more. But if you can stick with it, you'll see that by itself changes your life.
Yeah, no, I can tell just from the days that I get up and just get out of bed intentionally instead of drag out of bed or go out and walk, anything really that I do for myself, I feel a lot better than the days that the day is dragging me along rather than me attacking the day. I think it really makes a difference, and I've noticed that. And I'm very stubborn. I'm very hard to convince. So it's taken a lot, and you've been an amazing support off on the sidelines for me, both you and Amanda, and of course Krista. And I feel like every time I come in here and do the podcast, it's like a therapy session for me. So it's amazing. So thank you so much for joining us. I really do want to have you back. I can't wait to read the book. Actually, one thing we have to talk about, because this is breaking news. You quit your job as a hospital. Let's talk about that. Tell me about that, because that's a big move.
That's a big move that's been coming for a long time. I didn't just quit overnight. It wasn't like, I don't feel like it anymore. It was a very calculated move. For the past 6 months, I've really done a ton of soul searching. I put in my resignation when I decided I didn't want to do my physician leadership position at UNM anymore. My team and I made $52 million a year over year for 5 years for UNM. And then things got political, and it wasn't, appreciated anymore. And I was like, okay, maybe this is just a sign that I need to move forward, and I've always shown up for things that I believe in. And I really wanted to give back to UNM and the underserved community that we serve through UNM, which is amazing. And I was able to do that. I implemented all kinds of ease of practice models to achieve that goal of financial success as well, and mental health. With the work that I did as a physician leader. And then, that kind of, I started showing up for myself more is really what happened. And put in my resignation in April, and then decided to have my last day be January 1st of this year, or December 31st of 2022. And then in the past 6 months, that really, put fire under me to keep showing up for myself over and over and over again every day, because I didn't have a way to fall back in this golden handcuffs of benefits and, a paycheck that is coming to me every month. And, just showing up for myself in a way that what speaks to me and my soul, and the work that I'm doing now is in hospice, so end of life care. So I'm doing that, and that's giving me a paycheck so that I can also support myself through the other work that I'm doing, which is mental health. And, we can talk about that, mental health and psychedelics, at a different time. But I'm doing, national speaking. I'm doing consulting work for psychedelic retreats and people who are interested in that, getting through their own trauma, and just living a better life in general. So yeah, and then here we are, and my last clinical day was 2 days ago. And I feel such a relief to be able to be in this space. And be able to speak openly without feeling like somebody is watching me, that I'm going to get censored somehow, that, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to have that feeling anymore. And it feels wonderful. It feels wonderful.
Well, congratulations. I'm looking forward to seeing what's next and all the great things that you're going to do. And again, appreciate you so much as a friend and for being on the podcast. We will definitely have you back on, because psychedelics is a very interesting topic in mental health right now. And I am very interested in exploring that with you. So thank you again so much. And we look forward to having you on again soon.
Where can we find you, or your next chapter in your life of what you described you're going to be doing? Like, where can
Absolutely. So I have a company called Conscious Physician. I'm on Instagram. And, I'm also on just, regular like Facebook. I post my stuff on a lot of the little tidbit coaching tips are on Conscious Physician on my Instagram, if you guys want to check it out. Awesome. And, I post as often as I can. I'm trying to get help for that too. So.
Know how to ask for help. Another important tip.
Yes.
A good parting tip. So,
yes, ask for help.
Well, thank you again so much, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us today, and a big thanks to Dr. Fatemi for joining us. If you like what you heard today, please like, subscribe, and share with anybody you know who may need this resource. To find Dr. Fatemi's work, you can check out consciousphysician.com. And to find us, you can reach out at emotionalrunway@gmail.com. See you next time.